I'm going to introduce you to Dr. Stephen Volk. He lives in Oberlin, Ohio. He is a professor of history emeritus at Oberlin College. During an immigration crackdown in Oberlin, and this was many years ago, this was even before Trump, he and one of his students worked to end Oberlin's local police cooperation with ICE by ending its 287G agreement. And most recently, he is very involved with an organization called Oberlin Community Supporting Immigrants in Oberlin, Ohio. He conducts Know Your Rights trainings. He works in rapid response to protect Oberlin's immigrant population. And now, because of what's happening, he is also working with surrounding communities and helping them understand how to do this important work. So without further ado, I am going to turn it over to Dr. Stephen Volk.
Thank you so much, Molly. I appreciate that. And I am going to jump right in and share my screen and get ready to go here. So yes, I'm going to talk about some kind of issues in terms of your rights, your risks, how we resist, and ultimately how we win. Again, my name is Stephen Volk, Steve Volk, if you like. And there's my email address. The website and the Gmail address for our organization is also listed. To be very clear, I am not a lawyer, and the information that I will present here, while certainly research shouldn't be taken as legal advice, if you have a specific immigration question, you'll need to contact an immigration lawyer in your area. So let me get into it. Even in this post-Minneapolis surge moment, we're still facing the reality of immigration enforcement that is virtually lawless, unspeakably cruel, and accountable only to Donald Trump and Stephen Miller. Immigration enforcement is fueled by a massive $170 billion budget, which has made ICE the largest enforcement agency in the United States. It now acts as a roving secret police motivated by the administration's racism, xenophobia, and commitment to lethality. And it's always on the call to punish enemies and to provide favors for friends. Immigration enforcement is designed to be cruel, to be a performance of power that creates fear in the immigrant community and submission among those of us who watch in horror.
Oh, Jesus! Hey! Stop kneeing him in the face! That's his face! Stop it!
To do this, it's clear that ICE and Border Patrol have necessarily trampled on the constitutional rights and disregarded administrative and civil law in the process. What Trump has shown, both abroad and at home, is that he is at war with the principles of constitutional constraint. Constitutional rights are there to protect everyone who is present in this country, regardless of their citizenship status. And yet, systematically, these rights have been violated, beginning with the First Amendment right to protest. Not only has immigration enforcement broken up demonstrations and sought to deport legal permanent residents for speech acts alone, but they have murdered 2 U.S. citizens for exercising their First Amendment rights. The administration has consistently violated our Fourth Amendment right to be protected from warrantless searches and seizures, smashing their ways into homes and cars without probable cause or legally binding warrants. Our Fifth and 14th Amendment right to due process have been violated countless times. More than 350 judges, including many appointed by Trump himself, have ruled against the administration's mass detention policies that have ignored due process rights. As Stephen Miller put it, the only process invaders are due is deportation. The administration continues to violate the Eighth Amendment right against cruel and unusual punishment. On April 12th, a couple days ago, ICE announced the death of the 16th detainee this year in its custody. Nearly 50 detainees have died in custody since Trump returned to office, while detainees held in Camp East Montana in Texas talk of psychological torture at that camp. As of early April, some 60,000 immigrants were in ICE detention, many suffering under absolutely vile conditions. This includes, according to a recent report, thousands of children who have been detained, including many who were zip tied until their wrists bled. And this is in clear defiance of the Eighth Amendment protections we have. You would think that these people must be pretty serious offenders to have been placed in wretched prisons and suffered such punishment. But in point of fact, not only are the vast majority without criminal convictions or charges, not only have they been deprived of due process rights to argue their case before a judge, but the crimes for which they are incarcerated, being in the country without legal authorization, are quite literally civil misdemeanors, not criminal felonies. Not only are native-born citizens more likely to commit crimes than immigrants, but on a per capita basis, more members of the Border Patrol have been charged for criminal actions than have immigrants. And this just from today's news, which reported just today the arrest of one state's only licensed Hindi, Punjabi, and Urdu legal interpreter. She had lived in the United States for 35 years. It also reported today that France is seeking the release of an 86-year-old French widow who was detained by ICE. And Houston classmates are mourning the deportation of one of their senior high school students who was deported. To continue with our constitutional issues, the administration is attempting to violate the 10th Amendment by forcing immigration enforcement onto state and local communities under the threat of a loss of federal funds. Under the 10th Amendment, the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution nor prohibited by it to the states are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. Blue states cannot be forced to engage in the federal activity of immigration enforcement, but that's exactly what Trump is doing. In a like manner, the administration continually violates administrative and civil law. Under U.S. law, foreigners can seek asylum in this country based on specific categories of fear of injury in their home countries. Unable to remove asylum law totally, Trump has simply removed the immigration judges most likely to rule favorably in asylum cases. As of February, having removed more than 100 immigration judges, only 7% of those seeking asylum are now granted it. And this doesn't even address the administration's attack on standard legal pathways to immigration, including travel bans, restrictions imposed on nationals of 39 countries, pauses in permanent visa issuance affecting 75 countries, the imposition of massive fees for work permits and visas, as well as attempts to take away the citizenship of naturalized citizens. Because the administration willfully and aggressively violates the country's most basic constitutional rights, that is all the more reason to be clear on what these rights are as regards immigration enforcement. If ICE comes to your home, the Fourth Amendment guarantees that law enforcement can't enter any home or private space without legal authorization, by which it means a judicial warrant. Courts have determined that you have given away your Fourth Amendment rights if you open your door. So we are informing our citizen neighbors, our immigrant neighbors, never open your door unless you know who's there. The Fifth Amendment gives you the right to remain silent. You do not have to show identification. You can ask for the name and ID of any officer you're speaking with. ICE warrants, the one that you see on the right of your screen, are civil warrants. They are not criminal warrants. They don't give law enforcement the right to enter your home or any private space. A valid judicial warrant, which is the warrant on the left here, must be signed by a judge, justice of the peace, or magistrate. It must contain the address of the place to be searched. It must describe the area to be searched. If ICE comes to your workplace, they can enter any space that's open to the public, for example, the dining room of a restaurant or a public space in the library, but they can't enter any space where public access is not normally allowed. A restaurant's kitchen, in any room in the library where the staff work, that's not open to the public. If ICE agents show up looking for someone and only has an ICE detainer and not a judicial warrant, employers should tell their agents to come back with a real warrant. That is hard to do, but it is legal and it is not obstructing the course of justice. We are encouraging employers, pastors, school administrators, and others to post signs like these to designate areas where the public is not permitted, and therefore where immigration enforcement can't enter without a valid warrant. Employers also have the right to tell ICE that they're not welcome in their establishment, or they could post signs signaling their support for our immigrant neighbors. Our rights in public spaces are more limited than the right in a home or an office or at work, but everyone, citizen or not, still has rights, particularly if stopped by ICE or immigration enforcement. You have the right to remain silent. Don't sign anything. Don't offer any non-US ID. You can ask if you're free to go and walk slowly away. In a car, driving in a car, ICE cannot conduct random traffic stops. They must have a reasonable suspicion of an immigration violation or a federal crime based on specific facts and not just appearance or language. Still, ICE is supposed to operate under very narrow jurisdictional boundaries, but of course they don't. And the main tool they have is to allege interference, that somehow you have interfered with our operations. Knowing your rights, education, is the critical first step in defending your rights. Protecting your immigrant neighbors starts with that, but goes on from there. What we have found is that while there are a number of national organizations that work to protect immigrant and our rights, the ACLU, the National Immigration Law Center, and others, the critical work takes place at a very local grassroots level. I'm going to quickly discuss what we've done here in Oberlin, a small town of 8,000 people in Northeast Ohio, a kind of blue bubble in a very red state. What activists have found, though, in larger cities, in Minneapolis and Los Angeles and Chicago and Portland, is that organization works best on a hyper-local level, block by block, neighborhood by neighborhood. And with that in mind, here's what we did in Oberlin. As Molly was talking about at the start, in 2008, there were 2 successive ICE raids on a local Mexican restaurant, and we were utterly bewildered. We had no idea what was going on. 3 of us got together to write up a resolution for consideration by our city council, and it contained 2 main components. One, suggesting that city officials cannot ask the residential citizenship information from anyone who is seeking help, not police, fire, EMS, etc. Furthermore, the town was prohibited from entering into immigration agreements such as the 287G agreements with ICE. The key lesson that we learned from this is that it's important, really important, to have good relations with city officials, particularly with police, because police really dislike turning their officers into immigration enforcement agents, since it only will make the communities much less safe than they are. Relationships which we began in 2008 would prove incredibly important over the long run, and particularly today. With Trump won, we began conversations with First Church, a United Church of Christ congregation and the oldest church in town, to see whether the congregants and the staff would consider becoming a sanctuary church. What followed was also critical, a series of educational discussions with members of the church. A number of us gave talks, answered questions about the history of sanctuary, the history of immigration, current immigration policy, etc. At the end, the congregants voted for sanctuary, although it was never needed in that context. But since then, the church has been critical in providing support for some of the many immigrant families in Oberlin. And then with Trump 2, we began a number of Know Your Rights presentations for the town, coordinating our efforts with local indivisible groups, Lorain County Rising, with officials from the college, the school district, the business community, and the police department. By early 2026, following events in Minnesota, we changed them to Know Your Rights, Know Your Risks presentations and began to coordinate on the county level, as well as meeting regularly with similar organizations in Cleveland, Cleveland Heights, and Akron. And once again, the key takeaway was local grassroots organizing based on educational presentations. And finally, we founded our own rapid response team. Rapid response in a small community, Oberlin as opposed to, say, Minnesota, Minneapolis, or Chicago, has a few main purposes. Obviously, it's there to respond to immigration enforcement activity in or near town. But just as important, we are there to prevent the spread of rumors of activity when nothing is actually happening. And by coordinating with other groups, we help organize at the grassroots level. When you sign up for this, you're basically agreeing to install Signal on your phone, the Signal app. You agree that the purpose is to document the activity of immigration enforcement, to bear witness, to agree to participate nonviolently, to act to protect our neighbors, and not to make yourselves the center of the story. Other volunteers who don't want to do rapid response will sign up for things such as providing rides, accompaniment, English language training, shopping for immigrants, etc. Because our immigrant neighbors live in a state of constant alert and anxiety, the last thing we want to do is add to this by raising false alerts. To prevent that, we ask that people reporting immigration enforcement activities use the what's called as the salute model. You report when you call in, report on the size and the strength of the activity. What are they doing? Are they driving? Are they standing around? Are they breaking down a door? Exactly where are they? What are they wearing? Do they have bulletproof vests on? The exact time and date, any equipment that they have with them. These calls come in and they're verified in a number of ways, and if accurate, a text is sent out to rapid responders. We know that immigration enforcement could care less about our rights. By stepping in to help our neighbors, we are potentially putting ourselves in danger, as we witnessed with Renee Good and Alex Preddy. We have to take seriously not just the rights we're entitled to, but the risk that we face when defending these rights in the present authoritarian context. I love this photo. It shows Generalissimo Bovino, the face of Kristi Noem's aggressive immigration surges, who is making fun of a protester by pretending to blow a whistle. And we should note that Bovino has been forced out of Minneapolis and out of the Border Patrol while the protester is still there. But we must also note that the whistleblower could just as easily been arrested, pepper gas, or even murdered had the armed goons standing next to Bovino decided that she posed a threat to him. This is a moment when we need to understand our power to resist, as well as the dangers that protests may bring. What are our rights? Although these rights may vary by state or locality, in general, you don't need a permit to protest in response to breaking news. You don't need a permit to march in the streets or along the sidewalks as long as you're not obstructing traffic or access to buildings. You have the right to remain silent or to tell immigration enforcement that you will only answer questions in the presence of an attorney, no matter the citizenship or immigration status. You have the right to photograph anything in plain view, including federal buildings and law enforcement, when you are lawfully present in any public space. An officer can't legally tell you to stop filming in public as long as you're not interfering with our duties, creating a safety hazard, or standing on private property. You need to, throughout all of this, remain calm, maintain your distance, walk away if necessary. Think about your language, think about your tone, your volume, set boundaries. Always keep the interests of our immigrant neighbors in mind and not your particular interest. We've already seen that in order to defend immigrants, we are essentially defending democracy itself. Immigration enforcement is being used as a foot in the door in this administration's attempt to remove both constitutional rights and privacy protections from everyone. Not only has Trump challenged multiple amendments to the Constitution, but his administration has attempted to access databases, IRS, Social Security, employment, medical records for enforcement purposes, clearly creating the basis of a surveillance state that will soon absorb us all. We have seen this in action on the streets of Minneapolis. And Steve Bannon has another use for ICE as well. But nonetheless, the resistance to this has grown. For Trump and his enforcers, cruelty is the point, and those of us not on the receiving end are expected to remain silent. And yet, as they pursue this immoral policy, they've made a number of mistaken assumptions. They assumed that federal agents could kill anyone they wanted, but quickly found out that it's harder to justify the murder of white middle-class Americans than brown or black people. They found out that it is increasingly hard to maintain the grand lie that they are rounding up the worst of the worst, the vermin who are poisoning our blood, when their targets are people like Liam Conejo Ramos. They've forgotten that displays of power often leave powerful images in their wake, images that carry much more meaning than endless racist rants. Stephen Miller should have known this history, but he long ago made the decision to walk away from his own family's past. And they're forgetting that our history contains shameful lessons that many of us remember and have no desire to repeat. And so they are discovering that we do care, that we will come out when the winds turn bitter, that we won't be intimidated by federal enforcers armed to the teeth, and that we will stand by our black and brown brothers and sisters. In short, they are discovering that we will resist. People protesting Trump's attack on immigrants have turned up by the thousands and the tens of thousands. And on the frozen streets of Minneapolis, something really profound happened. The courage of the people of Minneapolis has been both astonishing and inspiring. The Minnesota activists absorbed lessons from enforcement surges in Los Angeles and Chicago, Portland, and Columbus. They have learned from the organizing work they did around George Floyd's murder and from their daily experiences. They stood up to Border Patrol and ICE thugs, and they showed us that we can resist the immoral, unlawful, and cruel policies of this government. It is clear that the public has turned against the Trump administration's anti-immigrant policies, with a steady 60% opposing ICE's campaign of terror. The reaction against the shock and awe moment of immigration enforcement has sidelined Kristi Noem and Border Patrol Bovino, but Stephen Miller's hatred of immigrants hasn't ended, And as a recent New York Times article pointed out, his plan now is to, quote, take apart immigrants' lives piece by piece. The suffering of children has become central to the Trump administration's enforcement strategy. So, what can we do now? Rabbi Ariel Rosenberg, whose Minneapolis synagogue is one of many faith communities actively defending their immigrant neighbors, advised that now is the time to build the bonds of trust that we need as we confront authoritarian encroachment in our towns and neighborhoods. Her advice is to pay attention to what we can do now while we are not under pressure, how we can repair relationships or create bridges where they might not be any. You will need to know your neighbors, she advises, to stand up and sustain your community against these attacks. In terms of protecting our immigrant neighbors, we can form ICE Watch and rapid response teams in local areas. While Minneapolis was able to turn back a mass surge, that doesn't mean that ICE has given up. Be prepared with hyper-local teams, prepared to notify others of immigration enforcement actions and to respond by documenting and bearing witness. The administration wants you to literally despise or fear your neighbors, but in communities across the United States, people have stepped up to collect and distribute food to those who are afraid to go out, to accompany their children to school, to be with them during ICE check-ins. Neighborhoodism, a commitment to protecting the people around you, regardless of where they come from, has replaced calls of hatred. You can encourage local businesses to be aware of their rights and to safeguard the rights of their employees by posting areas that are clearly private and legally off limits to law enforcement without a proper warrant. You can join a protest, support your kids when they walk out of schools to protest ICE activities. And we can use our power as consumers to boycott the companies that are lining up to grab their portion of the $170 billion granted to immigration enforcement over the next 4 years. Scores of corporations are making profits off the suffering of others, including private prison corporations like the Geo Group or Core Civic, tech companies that provide software, logistics, and spyware such as Microsoft, Dell, or Palantir, car rental companies like Enterprise, airlines that deport individuals, the big box stores that cooperate with ICE. Do these work? Do they have some kind of effectiveness? Sometimes they do. Following concerted pressure on Avelo Airlines, which was the main deportation airline, Avelo got out of that business altogether. Most importantly, what we are seeing now is a concerted effort to oppose the construction of concentration camps in states and cities around the country. DHS is planning to use $38 billion of an allocated $45 billion to build camps for immigrant detainees, including 8 large-scale detention centers to hold 7,000 to 10,000 people at a time and serve as primary locations for deportation. Flush with cash, ICE has spent $68 million to purchase a warehouse in Georgia, which is valued at $400,000. And it spent $123 million for a warehouse in Socorro, Texas, worth $11 million. All this, not surprisingly, has created a backlash, with more projects canceled, including in red states and cities, than are now being approved by local agencies. After all, voters aren't stupid when it comes to their tax dollars. They know that there are many better ways to spend $38 billion than on concentration camps or wars in Iran. You could get universal all-day high-quality preschool for 3 or 4 years old for the entire country for $35 billion. Free lunch for all students in the U.S. for $30 billion a year. You can end homelessness in the U.S. for $30 billion a year. You could help end world hunger for $35 to $50 billion a year. These are things that money can be spent on. And as always, we must tell our stories. We must speak truth to power.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Hi, my name is Mandy Jung. I do not represent my school district, and these are my personal views. Yesterday in the hallway, my student Ashley came up to me and said, "Good news, Ms. Jung, my mom got free." A month ago, Ashley came back to her apartment and both her parents were missing. She didn't know where they were. Her father remains in detention. Benito and his cousin were walking home from the store in early December. They were stopped by masked men and put in the back of an unmarked vehicle. The men asked for their papers. Benito, being 12, did not have any papers. He gave them his school ID, a meaningless piece of laminated paper with his smiling face and family name. They let him go. They kept his school ID. Ivan has been in hiding since January. He sends me emails asking when he can come back to school. I tell him I don't know. I paid his family's rent for January, $2,000. I don't know who covered February. Nicole was the first. Her father was taken from his job site. It cost $20,000 to get him back. Nicole's mother and youngest brother are disabled. When I talked about it online, asked people to donate money, several commentators called Nicole's family collateral damage and useless eaters. I paid their rent too. My students have more courage than every member of this committee. Some of them crossed a desert, waded through rivers, faced indignities and danger that we can only imagine, all to have the chance to sit in my classroom and dream. My students' stories have power, not to move you, because if your heart has not been moved by the sight of a blue bunny hat or tear gas being deployed on school buses or the federal government shooting a man 10 times in the back, then I'm afraid a few more sad stories will not fix that. No, I share my students' stories to shame you. Shame on you for your silence, shame on you for your inaction, and shame on you for your cowardice. I encourage you, GOP senators, say something, anything. You know this has gone too far. You know this is not over. A retreating force does not spend millions of dollars buying warehouses to hold people indefinitely. Speaking out is scary. Believe me, I know. I face threats and insults every day online. Someone mailed me a photo of my nephew to my home address. But I also see my students every day. I see the pain they are going through. No one deserves this, and especially not them. In closing, I know many of you are Christians. I know you believe in the power of salvation. I am an atheist. I don't believe in God. I believe in the people. Your God may forgive you for your weakness, but the people will not.
Rabbi Hillel posed three questions 2,000 years ago. If I am not for myself, who will be for me? When I am for myself alone, what am I? If not now, when? We who hold a dream of building a different kind of society must begin by building a different kind of community. So when we go out to build that community, let's be careful out there. As Rabbi Ariel put it, our fear is a sign that we're wise and paying attention to what's happening around us. What is also made possible by doing things that feel scary is that we learn we're more capable and powerful than we knew, not letting the fear be a barrier, but rather a doorway. Let's build the relationships that we need and the community that we require. Let's find our voices and let's fight like hell. If you want to sign up for our newsletter, you'll find the address here, and I'm sure that Molly and others can pass this along to you as well. And let me stop the share here, and I will be willing to take any questions.